Hello, everybody. We are going to be kicking off our second panel of the day as part of this Wellness and Wellbeing Global Summit. And this second panel is connecting the dots between corporate culture, wellness, well-being, and mental health. We have a couple of panels actually talking about culture. This one right now, and the last panel of the day, which will be architecting corporate culture for wellness, well-being, and mental health. And you may ask yourselves, or may ask me, if you want it, why we have two topics about culture. Well, as you saw in the first panel, culture is foundational to have a workplace where we address and discuss and have enough psychological safety to understand all elements about wellness and well-being. So that's why we are making such a we're putting an emphasis on all things culture, and especially because that's one of the main areas in which HR can make such a significant difference for everybody, employees, leaders, and the workplace in general. So, we're going to have an amazing second conversation today. Once again, thank you everybody for being so engaged in the comment section. I think it's a little crazy to try to bring those comments to the stage, but please keep them coming because I love seeing so much engagement among you. That is fantastic. So please keep coming those comments. If you are just connecting now for the first time to this panel, let us know where you are connecting from. And by the way, one thing that I didn't say at the beginning of the event was that we are recording all of these sessions. So they will be available for all of you in the Hacking HR Lab by next week. So if by any chance you're missing anything today or in the next couple of days, do not worry. All of it will be available to you by next week in the Hacking HR Lab. So without further ado, I'm hoping not to take too much time away from our amazing second panel. Let me start welcoming our moderator, Candace. Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for moderating this awesome conversation. I am excited to be in the background, learning from all the awesome things you're going to be talking about. So,
I am so passionate about this topic, and honestly, I can't wait to have this conversation. We've been having conversations like this for so many years, but the world has changed so much in the last little while. And to be able to hear from a panel of experts about what they're thinking about and what they're doing, I think it's so important now more than ever.
absolutely, and I feel that we have, for some reason, we swept under the rug of oblivion a lot of topics that we should have addressed long time ago, and the pile of dust under that
The
rug kept,
pilot test.
kept piling up and piling up and piling up, and now we can't hide it anymore because COVID is like,
No.
you know removing the rug, and here it is: diversity, equity, mental health, wellness, well-being, all of these things, guys, that you should have done before. Now they are coming back to you, haunting you with even more power than ever before because, well, they are amplified by COVID. So, there's no time to lose here in addressing
Mhm.
all these conversations. So, Candace, thank you so much for moderating this panel. I'm going to be welcoming your panelists, Regina, Pete, and Mary. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to this awesome conversation. Um, I'm gonna be in the background. If you need me for anything, Candace, the panel is all yours. Just just let me know if you need anything from me.
Okay.
For now, have fun.
Okay, I will. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It is my absolute pleasure. My name is Candace, and I'm the director of the Remote Performance Academy with teamit.com. And I spent a number of years trying to push this giant rock uphill to try and get businesses to pay attention to the business case of mental health in the workplace. And so I'm so excited to learn from all of you. And so I'm wondering, just as we get started, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and answering maybe just as an intro question, which dots do you think need to be connected? The title of the panel is Connecting the Dots Between Corporate Culture, Wellness, Well-being, and Mental Health. So a little bit about you and yourself, and which dots do you think we need to be connecting these days? Whoever wants to go first, just go for it.
Hi, Candace. I'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is
Awesome.
Regina Johnson. I'm the CHRO for MarketCast. And when I think about connecting the dots, what dots? Actually, it's all of them. When I think about what it means for the actual workplace and how people get their work done, the reality is we all bring ourselves to work and we have a life outside of work in addition to the work that we do. And to try and believe that they're separate, right, is a bit of a misnomer, right? It's about integration. And so when you think about the things that can happen at work as well as outside of work, those all have an interconnectedness into a person's overall performance, their productivity, their well-being, their level of engagement. So when I think about what that means on connecting the dots, guess what? From my perspective, it's all of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Regina. Who's next?
Okay, I'll go next. I know Mary Louise very well, so thank you for indulging me. My name is Pete Baker. I'm head of people and culture at the Plastic Bank. We address the problem of global plastic pollution into the oceans, and we've saved more than 2 billion bottles of plastic that we've been able to recycle and sell within the regenerative economy. We're a social enterprise. So for us, connecting the dots, we want to love our people as much as we love the planet. And so when we talk about connecting the dots, it's really the connecting intention to reality. And I think, you know, I've worked in multiple corporations, and in almost all settings, the senior leadership of the company really wants to create an environment where people are thriving, where people are able to be authentic, where people are able to bring their best selves to work, where people do have the safety to voice some of the challenges. And so that's always the intention, but somehow it's not the reality. And I think what you've seen over the last couple of years is a much clearer willingness to actually join those dots between here's what we want to occur, and let's make sure that we really actually change our policies, change our processes, more importantly, change our culture to actually enable the intention to come to life.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pete. Marie-Louise.
All right. Yes. Good evening, actually, from my side. I'm in Dubai, so it's a little bit evening here. Yes. Marie-Louise, I am working with PepsiCo in the MENA region. And what I would throw in, there's a lot of dots to connect. So I agree with my colleagues here online, and I think we have generally connected a lot of dots in PepsiCo so far. However, what I really think now is part of the cultural dots that we need to connect. It's really that leadership perspective. So middle managers are, managing the masses of a big organization, and making sure that they connect to this and they feel empowered, they feel comfortable to be, authentic and empathetic, to be able to drive this, I would call it holistic well-being, because it touches so many different aspects of the employee and the employee experience. So that's an angle that I'm thinking a bit about when it comes to connecting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I feel like there's about 5 different ways that we can go at this point. Pete, you said the difference between that we need to connect intention to reality. So where is the disconnect? Looks like you might be. Looks like we're having a little bit of a signal problem, Pete. Regina or Marie-Louise, do you want to hop in while we're waiting for Pete's signal?
Absolutely, and I'm sure Pete will have a fantastic answer relative to this, but I think a lot of it gets lost in translation with organizations around intention to reality. Is what are the tangible action points to making, a culture where everyone is able to bring their authentic selves in. It is a culture of inclusion. Those concepts, sound simple, but the action points to that is rather complex. When you think about what Marie mentioned around frontline and middle managers managing the masses, it really means you have to have that leader who is very intentional in understanding where each individual is, right, in their, particular life journey and their particular work journey, and then how they are connecting those dots and giving the space, as well as understanding what their particular needs may be, to remove those obstacles and to enable that person to essentially grow and thrive within the workplace. And so while we think about what that means in terms of giving the space, making sure that you're driving inclusive teams, those actions, there are quite a number of them. They're individualistic. They're not a law of averages. And it requires what I consider, a significant amount of effort by leadership to really have a deeper knowledge and understanding of their people and their teams in order to ensure that they're unlocking the potential.
Pete, you're back. We lost you just for a little bit there, but would love to hear what you were about to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hopefully this connection is better. I've changed onto a different router. I come back to some of what was referred in the previous group about safety. Most leaders want the reality presented to them. They want to hear the truth. The dynamics where employees have open dialogue about the business and about themselves personally, then you create the conditions for health. So actually, I almost come right back from the idea of conflict. The best leaders should be encouraging issue-based conflict, not personal conflict. And the best leaders can create the space for those conversations. And so that for me is often the biggest disconnect, that leaders sending the signal that they're not willing to be challenged, that they're not willing to have difficult conversations. And the result of that is people then don't bring themselves to work. They don't bring their authentic self, and and that if that is the starting point, then everything else is potentially buried underneath that. Mary Louise and I are lucky enough to be in the Middle East, which is an amazing place to work, but many people's employment or their family's ability to stay in the country is linked to their ability to keep their job. And a huge, when we look at mental health in this region, a huge amount of stress and mental health challenges are really caught up in the lack of safety in the work environment. It means people are fearful of losing their jobs, and if they lose their jobs, they've got 60 days to leave the country and all of those other things. And that makes it difficult for employees actually to perform at their peak, and certainly makes it difficult for to surface things like mental health. Because people don't want to put themselves out there, they don't want to take that risk. And so the best leaders really need to be intentional about role modeling the right behaviors, and about creating the safety and the space for people to voice really what's on their mind. So I think we're here in the Middle East. It is a bit of a pressure cooker because of the employment situation that creates some really interesting dynamics in this space.
Yeah, Marie-Louise, do you want to hop off there?
Yeah, another disconnect, I think, and this might be a little bit of a generalization, but I think, and I don't want to link it to generation necessarily, but I really do see from my experience in the companies and teams that I work with that if the leaders do not themselves have been allowed or allowed themselves to reflect on their mental well-being or their psychological safety, it's very difficult to them to understand that is a huge topic today, and that is something that their teams might be, and to a certain degree are really experiencing. So I think that's also a disconnect, that I don't allow myself to understand it and feel it, so I cannot really relate to others. And I think here we have a huge opportunity here, and I'm so glad that we're having this discussion today. And yesterday I was talking to a friend who is in the talent acquisition space, and she was saying, it's very difficult. We're trying to source a global well-being leader for a position. I was like, yes, I'm so happy to hear that these roles are coming up. That's a dedicated focus on this like holistic well-being and all the parameters that are there. So, I mean, that will close some of these gaps that we have and some of these disconnects. If we focus on, in a dedicated way, really to work on minimizing and closing the gaps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. The gap, and then for us as when we're in senior leadership positions to look at the gaps that we're trying to support these middle managers or these frontline leaders is also different for everyone, depending on their own personal experience and depending on their comfort with some of these conversations or these skills, the skill levels that they have on top of just trying to achieve whatever the KPIs or MBOs or OKRs or whatever. It's there's a lot in there for sure, and the intentionality. Again, we intention to reality. That's what you kind of kicked things off with, Pete. There's so many intentions, and yet there's this huge skill gap that can exist as well. How are things different today compared to, say, 3 years ago? What has changed in this conversation of well-being and culture? If anything.
Well, I'll have a crack. I think a couple of things have changed. Firstly, COVID and the work from home nature of COVID did really blur the lines between people's personal life and their work life. And to some degree, that was a good thing, because I think to build on Regina's point about people bringing their whole self, that's, if you're having a conversation with someone and they're sitting in their living room and you're sitting in your living room, it does create a bit more of a personal connection when you've got the kids running in the background and the dog walking all over the desk. And so I think that has created a more of a human conversation than we've ever had. I think more recently, the entrance of the younger generation, who are frankly just simply much more secure talking about their mental health challenge, partly because of the counselors in high school and counselors in university, and it's we all grew up and learned that yes, mental health and physical health are the same thing, but we probably didn't act like that when I first entered into the workforce. It was different. If someone broke their knee playing tennis, they would be treated as a hero. If someone said they're going on a mental health leave, there would be some kind of questions. I think with the younger generation, as they enter the workforce more, and they see mental health and physical health as the same thing. And I think the more those demographics enter, and I think also the employment market being reasonably strong at the moment for the best talent, people are simply expecting the right programs available for them. So I think those are a couple of the areas that have changed and have meant that taking both the stigma out of admitting mental health challenges, but also realizing that you can turn kind of wellness into a competitive advantage. And I guess to build on Mary Louise's point, people are now trying to hire senior people with a mandate towards wellness. That's evidence of the fact that people see it as a competitive advantage, both to get talent, but also to be able to drive the business forward.
Regina or Marie Louise?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to also, one idea to throw in here. I think what has changed also is this demand and need for closely realizing the purpose of, I have my own purpose and the company that I'm working for, how can I relate to their purpose? And, there needs to be, we need to come together, so to say. And I think this is also driving that well-being, because this is also, it's a safety well-being and it's a mental self, well-being as well. So if there's a disconnect between these, we're not doing ourselves a favor as an organization by missing out on that very important point, which is also driven by, the generations that are starting to work now and coming out, in the workplace. So this, I see this as a very big, it's a fundamental drift towards just linking that purpose. And if I can't find it, right, I will not be well. So that's, I think I see this change quite dramatic. The last, maybe even started before COVID, right, the trend, but really escalating.
Mm-hmm. Regina.
Yeah, and I would echo what Pete had mentioned relative to COVID being a real catalyst around change, and really it gave businesses an opportunity to have ways in which they could pivot or rethink how they were achieving their overarching results. On the flip side, it also enabled people and individuals to take stock within their lives relative to what were the things that the kinds of experiences that they wanted relative to work, the kinds of opportunities and development that were top of mind for them, balance, right? And what did balance and work integration really, what does it mean for them? And what did they think it should look like moving forward? So I like to say that COVID really was a catalyst, but of a bit of an accelerant of what we were already seeing relative to where work was essentially going. I think to Marie's point, these things were, part of topics. They were part of conversations. They were being thought of, and I think, COVID really kind of anchored around that. My biggest thing on the differences is that, while both companies, leaders, and individuals have had their own perspectives on what this means relative to outcomes, I think you've seen a real accelerant relative to talent being consumers. And when I say consumers and advocates, it's not only consumers and advocates of their own career and what it is that they want, but consumers and advocates relative to purpose, relative to their contributions, relative to brand even. And I think because of that, individuals and talent are much, much more critical and much more inspective around the company, its visions, its purpose, its value proposition than the kinds of conversations we were seeing anywhere from 3 to 5 years ago.
Thank you. Marie-Louise, I'm going to direct this next question to you. What's the role of holistic well-being in driving employee experience? And is technology helping or hurting?
Yeah, no, thanks. So I think, it's, I think the holistic well-being, yes. If we look at all the parameters that I think we have mentioned already, like, psychological safety, so knowing, that I can be safe. This started at COVID, actually, right? Where we had a lot, and many companies had a lot of frontline employees that were still operating, right? So the focus then became for their well-being actually to feel safe, like I can come home back to my family without contracting this virus. And at that point in time, we didn't know how dangerous it was in the beginning, right? So that's, that's on just the safety of well-being. And then, the psychological and the physical, for that matter. And I think it is touching on all these parts today. So the employee experiences, the employee experience as such, also we didn't discuss it so much just, like, say, 4 or 5 years ago. And now it's an enormous topic. And I think that's also, stimulated by the fact, by COVID, actually. It sounds bad. We should thank COVID for a lot of things. And then, for a lot of things we shouldn't, obviously. But maybe for the discussions that we are having now, this has opened up new doors for the HR community, which is very exciting and the right thing to do. So I think it really plays a part in driving the whole employee experience, both from the fact that it's expected, as we mentioned before, and we will be able to bring the right talent on board. But both also from a company side, and as some of the positive things with this is really that it's driving, much wider inclusion. because the way we work now, if we use technology, for example, Candice, you were mentioning technology as one point that can also help and stimulate this. Now we can have a level playing field. We can reach, a much wider talent pool. So that can include our diversity drive, right? We can offer employee opportunities to many more people, right? Which is also a kind of a security for them, right? And what Pete was mentioning before. We can also reach different kinds of skills that maybe we don't find in our marketplace today. And why are we limiting ourselves in terms of trying to find a niche skill in a market that doesn't exist, where it exists elsewhere? If we can use technology, i.e. remote working, we can reach there, right? And as the economy becomes more skills focused, that's also an enabler for us. So, I think it's a lot of these positivisms around that complete employee experience, both for the employee, but also obviously for the top and bottom line as well.
Yeah, Regina or Pete, you're both off mute. Hop in here.
Sure, thanks, Candice. And I think Maria has highlighted when we think about what does it mean around wellness, well-being, and the factors and into that. I mean, the great news is that there's a real understanding around the contributing factors to well-being. We know mental health, right, plays into those components, financial health, accessibility, right, and the things or the blocks and the barriers, right, that can impact and influence mental health. What is it that when we think about, kind of company culture, or even the way in which work or systems essentially are structured, and how do they affect the employee workforce, either in a positive way or a negative way? I'll give you a simple example relative to that in the intersection of technology. If, as an example, an employee's technology on the outside, the things that they use at home, are easy to use, easy to digest, but they come into the workplace and they are frustrating, slow, make it difficult for them to be able to do their jobs. That is a perfect example in which systems and infrastructure can actually contribute a little bit more to the detriment, right, of a person's ability, to bring their full selves to work and to thrive in the way that we would want them to essentially thrive. So I think the good news is the conversations are widening, they're broadening relative to all of the different factors that can contribute, right, to a positive employee experience, as well as to a positive culture and well-being. Back to your question relative to technology, technology, again, is a tool and enabler, and just like anything, should be leveraged in moderation, right? Leveraged for the purpose that it is. And anything that is over-indexed or overutilized, right, essentially, can be harmful. And I think, what leaders and companies especially have to grapple with is, where do they play that role, right, in the balance of where technology is a tool and enabler, right, for positive, versus one that is, starting to create detrimental or harmful effects, where people are constantly always on, constantly always responding, never getting a break, and then essentially creating, attributes of burnout. So I think those are the things that, companies, leaders, have to essentially grapple with and make sure that they're solving.
Pete. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point, and I think it's one that we are struggling with at Plastic Bank. Right, we are we're extremely global. We have basically employ anyone anywhere on the management team, and then we have plastic collectors in particular geographies in ocean communities. And so what it means is, part of our model is weird hours, and I think that it gets back to what Regina was saying. What we saw some burnout over the last couple of months with people who are, say, if they're say here, if they're working, say, in Egypt or something like that, they have to wake up super early to talk to people in Asia, and then they have to stay super late to talk to people in the US and in Brazil, and that became a real challenge. we've realized that that is fundamentally the model that we have and how we have to run our business for the next period of time. So I think we've tried to do two things. Firstly, we've tried to, as much as possible, give people the safety to switch off, right? And actually encourage people to switch off at various points of the day. I have what I call a U-shaped day, right? I work mornings and evenings, and I take the afternoon off. And pretty much everybody knows that, and that way anyone can get hold of me, but at various times during the day. And so I have to role model that. Our CEO role models that. Our CFO role models that. And we try to cascade that kind of down into the organization in order to prevent burnout. And we basically tell people, you've got to turn your technology off and silence it for the times of the day that you're off, but then realize, you're going to be in meetings till 11 p.m. at night and until 7 in the morning. And then you have time off during the day, and that's fine. And that works for some people, but we also have to integrate into our recruiting. Because if that doesn't work for you for whatever reason, we probably need to be upfront with you before you join Plastic Bank. That in order to be successful, these weird hours are going to be is part of it. So we're now actively hiring people for whom this is something they're super interested and curious about. And we've been transparent with people that if you want a 9 till 6 job, then you probably should look elsewhere. And so even that transparency, I think, is a big part of making sure that you're attracting talent that fit with the kind of value proposition that you're offering.
So important. We're definitely seeing just in my world problems with people being always on, and where we really see that is when people are perhaps sort of that new emerging leader. And there's this desire to prove themselves, to be seen. They're ambitious and don't want to be perceived as dropping any balls or anything. And so they're trying to prove themselves by being available to everyone and so on. And so I wonder if there's anything that you can share from your experience about how you've coached or how you've mitigated some of that risk or temptation. Do you have any solutions if people are seeing that?
I don't know if it's so much a solution, Candace, but especially as we've worked through COVID, a lot of the conversations that I've had with employees as well as leaders is how are they integrating, right, what they need out of their work as well as what they need out of their lives. And, getting into some of those tangible issues relative to burnout. And a great example to your point around the fact of, well, I always have to be on. And, then kind of shifting the conversation to say, does it have to be about visibility or does it have to be about outcome? And getting the individual to understand, when we're thinking about outcomes, right? Outcomes get us where we need to go. Visibility may or may not, right? And so when we think about the work at hand, where does visibility compare to outcomes, right, of what needs to get done, play a role? And I think when we have those conversations, individuals really then start to think about and understand, okay, what are the most critical points of visibility versus where is the most critical points for my energy to be extended towards these actual outcomes. And we've seen that actually help in the sense of, people staying on all the time. It's like, no, actually shut your Slack off for a little bit, right? And make sure that you can tune that noise out and focus in on essentially the work at hand. And by doing those things, it's helping people to be able to really focus in on, what we think the tangible outcomes are, and then dedicating the energy, effectively towards those times where they believe visibility is necessary.
Yeah, I can also add here, I think, that's true, Regina. And I think it really needs to relate also to the culture and values. If it's not embedded there, it's going to be difficult. We need to walk it, we need to talk it, and we need to live it. What we did, for example, we used our executive team, executive committee, and they showcased it from the beginning. So because we had a lot of feedback around, always on, excessive work hours and so on. So they came up with, okay, what have we done as a leadership team of this organization, right? So, meetings are, kept to 50 minutes and 25 minutes. Decks, maximum 10 pages of decks. This is great. I don't know if it's working 100% of the time. I guess not, but the intention is there, right? So don't spend all that time. We want to discuss rather than, present slides. And reduce the number of, or actually don't invite people to meetings, right? Really be selective. And they did it themselves, right? So they only invited the people that really have a role to play. And many people, but it's good for me to learn. That's true, but it's also then taking your time, right? So try to take a little bit control of your calendar. And then one thing that I always share with people, I actually think is a great idea, because you can control calendars, right? So we sent invites across the whole region for learning and vitality zones. So 3 hours a week, everybody's calendar is blocked at the same time, meaning, if you accept that meeting, nobody else should go in and invite you, right? So that's time for you, dedicated time for you to learn, like educate yourself, or do something for your vitality, take a walk, go to the pool, whatever you want to do. And that's a speech from the top and action from the top. I think that's a key fundamental, right? That you get it embedded in the way of operating.
Pete, it looked like you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, no, it just reminded me. It was interesting you talking about. I mean, I'm just reflecting upon moments that create the embedding, right? What was, and he would. I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. But our CEO caught COVID, and honestly, it was actually a great moment for the company because he genuinely had to switch off. For a period of time. He's fully recovered now and full vital health and absolutely fantastic. So everyone's come out a winner. But it sent a signal to the organization about this indispensability and this availability kind of concept that you need to always be on and always available and always, because he realized, oh, wow, I've got to beat this and I need to prioritize my own health. And that was just a great signal to the organization. And so, if he can switch off for 2.5 weeks to recover from COVID, then you probably can too, is a conversation I've had with multiple people who go on about how they can't possibly switch off or they can't possibly even take a vacation because they're far too important in terms of the decisions that they have to take. It's like, well, hang on, it is possible. And yeah, that just was, Mary Louise was, as she was talking, I was reflecting upon that we were able to use that as a moment, as a teaching moment to the rest of the organization that I think it hopefully helps us avoid some of the burnout that we may have been heading for.
Yeah. Just thinking about that, are there any other moments that you've seen over the last couple of years where you think these are some learnings that we need to be taking forward? What are some of the learnings in terms of the connection between well-being, wellness, mental health, and culture that you've had over the last couple of years that you want to bring forward?
Well, I'll start.
Regina.
I think in the past, couple of years, Pete had also highlighted that, COVID was a catalyst, but more importantly, also we started to see how that shaped up into other areas of well-being, especially from a diversity and inclusion perspective. So when you think about things that were happening, particularly in the United States, relative to racial and social injustices, we were seeing quite a bit of violence against many minority groups, Asian Americans, Jewish Americans, continued around Latin Americans, as well as African Americans. And I think, those moments, that had essentially played themselves out also gave us, teachable ways for companies to really kind of understand and to more deeply connect with their people and their teams. And so when we think about, some of the areas, that I'm most proud of with some of our leaders, the check-ins that they would do with individuals, to understand how are they doing and whether or not they were okay. The listening sessions that would take place where there was no expectation. It was just about a safe space for them to be able to articulate their feelings, to, ask questions, to seek allyship or guidance. And in those moments, we found that by giving that kind of space and enabling ourselves to create those connections, it really has deepened a better understanding between our leaderships and our teams, and kind of the connection to who we are and our overall purpose as a company and organization. And I think that while those moments, of course, are terrible, and they create a real sense of trauma. The reality is those connection points and how we sought to understand and create those connections, I think was a real positive outcome.
But Regina, how did you encourage people to vocalize during those listening sessions?
I think the key piece was essentially just making the space. Believe it or not, we did not come in with pre-questions. We just gave the space, and each person then just started naturally sharing their experiences, and it evolved. And people took the time. Surprisingly enough, we didn't know whether or not people were going to talk or not going to talk. But we said this is the space that we were going to make. We talked about, our own individual experiences and the stance that essentially we had relative to what was happening essentially, and, we were seeing in the world. And that was enough, right, to start to generate those conversations, which, again, led to other ways in which we knew we could continue to support leaders and their teams around outcomes and safety.
I got goosebumps as you were talking about not coming in with the questions,
Yeah.
actually just creating the space.
Yeah.
It's courageous, risky, and powerful. Marie-Louise.
Yeah, I think we have never really, as much as we do now, spoken about, kindness in leadership. I think vulnerability, caring leadership, right? It's really, and it's definitely the right thing to do. And I think we're kind of fortunate to be working in this era when that is really becoming, an emphasis. And what we have done also, these moments of truth, kind of, where you see that, okay, we will test ourselves. In Middle East here is, we have we have financial instability in several of our markets. And we had specific, and we have also used, that sounds bad, but we have used those situations to a positive, with a positive outcome in terms of really showing the care and redirecting focus. Like we have a situation in Lebanon, who had, the country and market hasn't been in a stable situation. People are really suffering deflation and everything. And we directed, I directed our HR leader there to try to find, a way to negotiate with the gasoline station owner, right, to see if we could fill people's cars with gas so they could travel. So, it's, I think in these instances, and that also you build up that psychological well-being in terms of, okay, I'm in a place where it's not only me who need to look after myself, but my organization is doing the same. And I don't think it was like this, right? I asked my dad when he worked. It wasn't like that when he was working. But now the social responsibility that companies voluntarily also take on, it's amazing. And it's really an opportunity to build that culture, right, for your employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I build on that, if you don't mind? I mean, one of the most traumatic experiences, or probably the most traumatic experiences that we've had at Plastic Bank, was the shutdown of our operations in Haiti. This was one of our pioneer markets, extremely successful. We were improving the lives of thousands of people in Haiti. And because of the safety issues and our collectors were being taken hostage and all of our assets were being confiscated by various gangs, we had no choice. We couldn't run our business. And so we had to close operations. And obviously that was extremely traumatic for the Haitians, given they'd lost their jobs. But it was extraordinarily traumatic for people across the whole organization who took such pride in the fact that we were addressing the problem of ocean plastic in Haiti, and then we were improving the lives of thousands of people who were collecting that and receiving a living wage from us. And so we had to, we created kind of, we called them kind of lunch and learn or sessions, but they were basically dialogue to get people to talk about how they felt about our departure from Haiti. And we tried to reframe it as, look, if by closing Haiti, we can open in Cameroon and Tanzania and Nigeria and in many other places. And so that logically made sense. And so at the leadership team level, yeah, it absolutely makes sense. The resources we were spending on Haiti, we can use elsewhere. We'll be able to help even more people and collect even more plastic. But we really underestimated I think the trauma that people had and their desire to really vocalize that trauma and be heard. And I think almost everybody said, yeah, we understand why the decision was made. I get it, but I just don't like it. And even creating that was seen as quite cathartic moments for people across our global organization. And at least, what we're seeing then is that it allowed people to kind of process that trauma and move towards a stage of kind of realization and acceptance, even if they somehow wish that the situation was different.
Right. Oh, powerful story and experience. Thank you for sharing that, Pete. We're just in the last final stretch, and so we've got time for, I think, one more question and to hear from each of you. If somebody's listening to this right now and is thinking, okay, I want to do this, and I want to connect the dots in my organization between well-being, wellness, corporate culture, mental health, and I need to be helping everybody to perform at their highest and best. I've got pressure from the top. I've got pressure from in every part of the org. What do I do? How do I manage this tension between business success and well-being and everything that people are still enduring? What's one piece of advice that you could give them?
Mary Louise, you've got the microphone. Go ahead.
Really? Regina has it and you had it. I didn't even have it. No, I think, yeah, so good question. There's obviously a lot of advice, and I'm sure many of us can help, but I would really relate it. One of the advice would really relate it to the expectation from current as well as future employees, right? So if you want to be in business today, you want to be in business tomorrow, and you want to continue to flourish, you really need to bring this high up on your agenda and make sure you execute it well and make sure it works, because this is what your current staff, and by the way, maybe even your current colleagues, right? If you're there to convince part of the executives, and the ones that are going to work for you in the future. I would link it to that.
Okay. Pete?
Yeah, the phrase I always like is high support, high challenge, and reframing the concept of leadership role modeling in terms of high support and high challenge, and agreeing with the leaders of the organization that their role is high support and high challenge, right? It's easy to be high challenge and low support and you create fear. It's easy to actually be high support and low challenge and you create complacency, right? The best organizations actually have both high support and high challenge. And if people really feel that their leader is there to challenge them, to make them better, and at the same time to support them and help them, then you create the right conditions for wellness, for mental health, for people being able to be their authentic self. But if you really have leaders being willing to work and realize that every interaction with the employee is an opportunity to demonstrate high support and high challenge at the same time, you create the right conditions.
I agree with everything Marie and Pete said. The only thing I would add is, it goes also back to transparency and role modeling. And if you are not able to essentially connect those dots for your people and your teams as well as your peers, then that also creates, I think, a little bit of a disconnect relative to the fabric, right, that somebody's trying to create. So, and that is, right, one of the biggest challenges is, how are you influencing your teams as well as your peers in order to start to move these things forward? And it doesn't mean that everything gets solved overnight, but if you're able to paint that vision, role model that vision, collaborate across your peer group around that to drive that continuity and consistency, then essentially you will start to see the fruit from that labor happening.
Wonderful. Enrique, why don't you come on back and join us and help us wrap up this session?
Hello. Well, no, this is awesome. Great conversation. Thank you, Candace, for leading the conversation, and to Regina, Pete, and Mary Louise for sharing all these awesome insights. Exciting conversation as part of creating organizations that care more for wellness and well-being. And we're going to be, for everybody who is joining us now or who is connected still in the conversation we have a lot of people connected. Thank you so much for being here. After this conversation, in the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to be moving on to the third panel of the day, which is going to be building resilience, helping people navigate the challenges of this chaotic world, which is going to be another great conversation. So I think I'm all good on my end, Candace. I think it was awesome.
Thank you, everyone, so much for your time and for your expertise.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Enrique, for inviting us. Great to see you, Candace. And Regina, nice to meet you. Mary Louise, always good to see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
Lovely.
And everyone connected online now, stay tuned. We're going to be coming back in about 5 minutes or so with the third panel of the day.